Hello and welcome to Epicenter. No ambiguity, no noise. Let's come straight to the point. I have often said to get to the bottom of any geopolitical issue, we must look at the history of its politics rather than politics of its history. There is a profound difference between the two. When you look at events from an objective historical lens of a researcher, the layers that open up are often stunning. Kashmir's political history since 1947 is a fascinating study of betrayals, demagoguery, and broken and withered dreams. Considered unfinished business of partition by Pakistan, territorial disputes over Kashmir regions sparked two of the three major Indo-Pakistan wars in 1947 and in 1965, and then a limited war in 1999. While the external forces were claiming Kashmir, Indian internal domestic politics of Kashmir was tearing it apart as well. What was this internal politics that kept Kashmir bonfire burning? What was going on in Kashmir that started the simmering discontent? And then, of course, it all blew up in our face in 1990. Kashmir's history is not just Abdullahs and Muftis. Abdullahs, of course, a lot more prominent than Muftis and have been around for much longer than Muftis. But there are other people also who have played very significant roles, like historical figures like Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq, Mir Qasim. Who were these people? And what were their roles in defining the history of Kashmir and bringing us up to this point? Without understanding their role, we won't be able to understand the proper political history of Kashmir. To discuss this, I have with me Dr. Ramesh Tamiri, and it's my absolute honor and privilege to welcome him to Epicenter. Dr. Tamiri is by training an ophthalmologist, but he's a scholar par excellence on Kashmir affairs. He's a columnist, he's a thinker, and he has been involved as a student of Kashmir affairs for a very long time now. Dr. Tamiri has authored a book in 2011, which was Painting and Theatre in Kashmir, Suraj Tipu's Journey. In this book, he talked about the theatre journey of Kashmir. And he has a forthcoming book, which is, when I spoke to him earlier, he said that the book is coming, it should be out in next few months. That book is going to challenge the commonly held misperception that Kashmir was the zone of peace during 1947 partition, when Punjab was burning and Bengal was burning, and this whole misconception that Kashmir remained calm. Dr. Tamiri's contention and his research says no, it did not stay calm. It was burning as well, like it had been burning before that. So, Dr. Tamiri, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me to the show.
It's a pleasure, Dr. Tamiri. What we are going to do today, we have an arduous task at hand. It's not easy. We have to somehow bottle up the entire 75 years in next 55 to 60 minutes. So I thought the best way to do this is to divide the history between different phases. And that way we can talk about some major or salient features of that particular phase that determined the fate of Kashmir. So I thought, let's just start with 1947, because that is just a very convenient starting point. 1947 is when India gains independence. Pakistan is formed. However, Kashmir is still up for grabs. Maharaja Hari Singh has signed a standstill agreement, which of course meant that it will give Maharaja Hari Singh some time to think over what he wants to do. Although there is research now, and I would like you to counter me with that. There is research now that Maharaja Hari Singh wanted, right, in 1947, early 1947 itself, he wanted to join India. And Nehru did not allow it, or Nehru said we needed some more time, or he needed some popular consent, whatever that popular consent meant. Did he mean it was Sheikh Abdullah's consent? We will talk about all that. But 1947 to 1953 is a very interesting era, because that is truly Sheikh Abdullah's era. He was the paramount, leader at that point. And that is when he had been around since 1930s, but that is when he really got the reign of Kashmir. So tell us what was happening from 1947 to 1953, and what are some of the takeaways from this period, that and some of the learnings, and then we will move on onwards.
The politics of the period from 1947 to 53 was shaped by four factors. One was the inner dynamics of the politics of national conference and the ideological political worldview of Sheikh Abdullah. Second factor was the role of Pakistan. The third factor was Anglo-American bloc. They were trying to internationalize the dispute, and they were trying to pressurize India to come to the Western bloc. That also had an impact on the shaping of the politics from 1947 to 1953. And the fourth factor was India's Kashmir policy. Now I'll take these one by one. India's Kashmir policy was built on a wrong premise that Sheikh Abdullah was secular and he was a nationalist Indian. So when the basic premise is faulty, the whole Kashmir policy is on a slippery ground.
Correct.
That is one factor. India's Kashmir policy, in fact, to be frank enough, I am still at a loss to understand how did India visualize Kashmir and also its future in the broader context of Indian state building and nation building. Was Nehru interested in Kashmir just because he wanted to fight two-nation theory, and Kashmir being a Muslim majority state, was this the best place to defeat two-nation theory by having accession of J&K to India? Second reason was because this region is very important and also called a strategic northern frontier of India. Was Nehru really sees that this strategic northern frontier, which includes also the place Gilgit and Baltistan, where three empires met once, was this the objective? Then third factor was Nehru interested just it was because it was his ancestral place. So the Kashmir policy which Nehru framed, it looks that he was not really interested in fighting two-nation theory, because by agreeing to Article 370, which meant the federal devolution of power on the basis of the recognition of Muslim subnationalism. In other words, it meant a Muslim majority state cannot be as equal as other states of India. A Muslim majority state has to be more equal than others. In fact, this principle was directly reinforcing the two-nation theory. Then second thing, along with this Article 370 meant that you are having a semi-sovereign Muslim state which is funded by public exchequer of India, but which is not accountable to India. India and also the public, Indian public. Then along with Article 370 did not come alone as a constitutional principle where you linked the federal devolution of power with Muslim subnationalism. There was also the principle of Muslim precedence. Muslim precedence primarily meant that Kashmiri Muslims, they have to get precedence in all spheres, politics, economics, administration. So primarily, and third reason was Nehru never felt that Kashmir J&K has to be part of the secular nation building. So the secular institutions were not tried. Then then other non-Sunni minority groups in Kashmir, Kashmiri Hindus in particular, and Jammu Hindus, their consolidation was not part of the India's Kashmir policy. Nehru primarily thought that the best way to retain Kashmir is by giving full freedom to the Kashmiri Sunni Muslim elite and run it rather as long as they support accession and do not challenge Indian authority. Any regime was acceptable. So what this ultimately helped, this corresponded with the politics of Sheikhullah also. Sheikhullah was never secular. In fact, up to 1935, Britishers patronized Sheikhullah because Britishers wanted lease of Gilgit. After Gilgit was leased by Maharaja Hari Singh in 1935, Sheikhullah lost the British support. And second is Jinnah had utter disregard for regional Muslim leaders.
Yeah.
Muslim League was party of Muslim feudals and also where Muslims were in minority, UP, Bihar, central provinces. So any regional Muslim leader who had some following among his people, it was unacceptable to Jinnah. So Sheikhullah neither had support of Jinnah nor did he have British support. So he was left, he started exploring. And it was that, it was for tactical reasons that he came closer to Congress. In fact, he always talked of Congress, Gandhi or Nehru ki Congress. That means he never supported the ideological and the political outlook of Congress. This is very important to understand why Sheikhullah time and again talks Gandhi and Nehru's Congress.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Let me stop you and ask you a question here. Sheikh Abdullah, we really haven't seen a definitive biography of Sheikh Abdullah yet. What we have seen mostly is what he has written himself, Atish-e-Chinar, and then what has been written about him is mostly hagiography. That is what happens about tall leaders like that, or who have gained some importance. To really analyze Sheikh Abdullah and Nehru, a lot has been talked about their quote-unquote friendship. What you are saying is that Sheikh Abdullah made a very tactical understanding with Congress. It wasn't
limited understanding
everywhere else. So he made a very tactical, as a politician, it made sense to him to make this tactical understanding with Congress. He did not, Jinnah wasn't giving him much space. British weren't giving him, they had lost interest in him. So then he was the only person. How true is it? Because I've read some research that he wanted to create an independent Sheikhdom. He wanted to create an independent Sheikhdom of Kashmir, where India and Pakistan, he would have some friendly relations with India and Pakistan. Do you accept that?
That was precisely the politics of Sheikhullah. In fact, I like to dilate on it further.
Okay.
In 1931, during the Muslim conference movement, when Sheikhullah was part of the Muslim conference, there were two groups. One was the old conservative class of Muslims, Saaduddin, Shah, Mirwais, Yusuf Shah, the group which later on went with the Pakistan. Then Sheikhullah represented he represented three factions rather. One was the Muslim educated class, which had recently come after doing their graduation and post-graduation from Aligarh University, from Lahore and other places. And around that time, there was a new mercantile class. In Kashmir, we called them as German Khojas. So it was the group of upcoming Muslim mercantile class, the new Muslim educated class. The previous class played the role of Britishers to limited extent. They were just prepared to support British on the issue of lease of Gilgit and other things. But Sheikhullah had higher ambitions. He wanted to see that Kashmiri Muslims become a ruling class. That is why Sheikhullah's movement was never anti-autocratic. It was never anti-feudal. In fact, I have studied this in detail. Peasant question was totally absent in Sheikhullah's movement. And main grouse against Maharaja was that he was a Hindu and he was a non-Kashmiri. So the roots of Shaivism, Kashmiri Shaivism in Sheikhullah's politics stem from this fact. Then Sheikhullah's politics all along whatever alliances he forged with Congress, initially with the old conservative leadership of Kashmiri Muslims, then with Congress, then with PN Bazaz, Royist, then with communists. In fact, I would like to talk on that communist angle also, and then finally with Pakistanis later. In fact, in 19 Sheikhullah in 1945, Jinnah was invited to 1944. Jinnah was invited to Kashmir. It was the Sheikhullah group who invited Jinnah. It was the communist group. And during the Sopor session of the National Conference, the concept of self-determination was highlighted. In fact, Nehru, along with Khan Ghaffar Khan and Abdul Samad Khan Achakzai, they attended this Sopor session. What is very significant that Nehru got alarmed when he saw that Sheikhullah was supporting the communist program of self-determination. In fact, 2 years before that, the General Secretary of CPI, G. Adhikari, had come out with a very dangerous thesis that is infamously called Adhikari thesis. It visualized, it not only accepted the logic of Pakistan on the basis of Muslim nationalism, but it also called for balkanization of India into 16 states. So Sheikhullah supported the communist demand for self-determination.
So Sheikhullah supported the communist demand and Nehru knew it.
Yes.
Our position is that Nehru knew that.
Yes. Yes, Nehru was alarmed.
He felt the friendship come from. Where is this narrative of friendship coming from?
No, I'll talk about that. Yeah. In fact, Nehru got alarmed. He thought that because Sheikhullah allowed communists to hijack the show because it suited his demand. Because in those 16 states, Kashmir would also be carved out as an independent sheikhdom.
Indeed.
So Nehru got alarmed, and I am told the people I interviewed who were part of the Sopor session, they told me that Nehru got in touch with DP Dar at that stage of time. So he wanted to keep track, and Nehru was alarmed about the role of communists. Then we come to the 1946. That is very important, when Sheikhullah launched Quit Kashmir movement. The famous British Communist Party leader Rajni Palm Dutt, who had an Indian connection also, he visited India. And it was the time around that time there was cabinet mission was also, and it looked that India would be a very loose center, sort of confederation of states. It was Rajni Palm Dutt who told Sheikhullah that after there is going to be Britishers would leave soon, and you ask for immediate transfer of power to Sheikhullah. So Sheikhullah, without even consulting his working committee, he launched the Quit Kashmir movement. There are two things here I would like to talk about.
Who was he launching the Quit Kashmir movement against? Against the Maharaja?
Yes. In fact, the very logic of Quit Kashmir was Maharaja is a non-Kashmiri. He should leave.
Yeah.
So they were asking the transfer of power to the local Muslims. Then there are two questions which you are asking. One is, if Nehru understood, how did he still have friendship with Sheikhullah?
Yeah.
Nehru had erroneous understanding of Sheikhullah also at that point of time. He thought primarily it were the communists who were rather positing an agenda which was detrimental to the Indian unity. But at that point of time, Nehru thought that the best option for Kashmir would be to have Sheikhullah on his side. So for Nehru also, it was a simple expediency, because later on, Nehru confessed to his intelligence chief, B.N. Malik. He has written his memoirs, My Years with Nehru, Kashmir chapter. There he quotes Nehru saying that Sheikhullah is communal, and all that I am telling you, this is recorded by B.N. Malik, and he quotes Nehru after the 1953. In fact, Bian Malik claims that Nehru also told him to probe connections of Sheikhullah with Britishers. And he said that Sheikhullah had always been a communal figure.
Yeah.
And now I'll be coming to the next question. How was the accession possible? What was the Sheikh's stand around that point of time?
Right.
There is a very important point raised by you, and that is Maharaja Hari Singh. A very distorted narrative by National Conference and Communists. In fact, in sections of Congress also, they said that Hari Singh was dreaming about independent Kashmir. He was delaying accession. This is totally wrong. There is nothing on record to suggest that at any point of time, Maharaja Hari Singh was dreaming about an independent Kashmir. There is nothing on record. Number two, after Mountbatten's visit to Kashmir, that is June 1947, Mountbatten tells Hari Singh, Maharaja Hari Singh, that in case you accede to Pakistan, it will not be considered an unfriendly act by India. Hari Singh got alarmed, and on the last day, when there was going to be a meeting with aides, Hari Singh feigned colic, and that meeting did not take place. And then Hari Singh was conscious about 3-4 things. The delay in accession, one reason was it was a Muslim-dominated state. 75% of the population was Muslim. Any hasty decision by Maharaja Hari Singh would have pushed the state into civil war. So Hari Singh was taking his own time to declare. When Mountbatten visited Kashmir, Hari Singh had decided that the only option for him, for Hindus of J&K and for the state was accession to India. But when to do it? Second reason was Hari Singh had no faith in Nehru. He thought that they would bring Sheikhullah and he'll be out of power. So the price Nehru was seeking for accession was not integration of J&K state with India. He was seeking power for Sheikhullah.
Rehabilitation of Sheikhullah. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, Nehru, on the 26th of October also, Nehru refused to accept the instrument of accession. Then when finally Sheikhullah, Meherchand Mahajan and Sardar Patel intervened.
Yes.
In fact, on 24th of October also, when Pakistanis attacked this Mohra powerhouse, J&K's Deputy Prime Minister Ramlal Batra had gone to Delhi with the instrument of accession. Nehru refused to meet him. And for that, the Hindus of Baramulla had to pay a heavy price. Had Nehru accepted instrument of accession on 24th of October, the Baramulla Hindus and Sikhs would not have suffered.
Massacred.
They met on 27.
Yeah.
So yes, then there is documentary record. There is a study by Prem Shankar Jha, Rival Versions of History, 1947. He gives the detailed archival evidence how from 13th September Maharaja was virtually begging Government of India to accept the instrument of accession. In fact, in my view, Maharaja had already decided on accession even in June, when he started exploring getting Meherchand Mahajan as the new Prime Minister for his state. Then Maharaja was also aware that the Jammu-Pathankot link, the road was also not motorable, the ammunitions with the state army were low. Then third thing which was weighing on Maharaja's mind was the loyalty of a section of his state army. I mean, Muslims who mostly belonged to Mirpur and Punch, and they were already influenced by the communal politics of Muslim League and Western Punjab. So Maharaja was...
Dr. Tamiri, we have established here in no uncertain terms few points. There is no evidence that Maharaja was dithering or he was waiting on accession to India. He actually he had made up his mind as far back as June. So that is one thing that is established. It was Nehru who was denying it. The price Nehru wanted for accession was not complete integration with India, but rehabilitation of Sheikh Abdullah. We have established this. We have also established that Sheikh Abdullah did not have, he was a communal-minded person. He was looking at his own interests, and he really did not have the best interests of Kashmiris or India at heart. That is for sure. We have described, at best, you could call him an opportunist. I mean, it would be a very generous view. You could call him an opportunist. So that is one view. The friendship, famed or whatever, the narrative of friendship finally goes kaput in 1953. In 1953, Sheikh Abdullah as prime minister is now dismissed by his quote-unquote friend, Nehru. What led to this dismissal?
Yes. In fact, in 1947 itself, we had two important evidences. One is by Ram Manohar Lohia, who was socialist leader. He visited Kashmir in late November. His confidential note, a long note, it was published by Illustrated Weekly of India. It was Mr. Sandeep Bamze, a journalist. He published this note. In fact, Ram Manohar Lohia says that Sheikh Abdullah's option is independent Kashmir. This is November 1947. Then we come to December and January. Sheikh Abdullah had a meeting with Chaudhry Abbas, the Muslim conference leader. They agreed on something that both India and Pakistan should withdraw and will unite to form a government. In fact, Adlai Stevenson, who comes in the picture around 52, he corroborates it. And this all is recorded by well-known journalist of Kashmir, Mr. Sanaullah Aftab, in his book, Kashmir in Flames. So that is one aspect. Now, what led to 53? There were three factors. One factor was, which I said earlier, the influence of Anglo-American bloc. Anglo-American bloc, it wanted both. It wanted to use Kashmir to force India to stay away from the Soviet bloc or non-alignment and align with West as a frontline state. That is one reason. Now you see Henderson, you see Stevenson, how they were, in fact, it started much earlier, during even the first meeting in the UN Security Council. I'd come to that later. Second reason was the politics and the ideological outlook of Sheikh Abdullah. There was irreconcilable conflict between the imperatives of Indian secularism and the politics of communal Muslim subnationalism of Sheikh Abdullah. How long this could continue? How long this patchwork and tactical expediencies and slogans of Gandhi ji ko Kashmir mein Suraj ki kiran dikhai gayi or other things? So this conflict was bound to erupt someday. That was second factor. The third factor was the factional struggle within National Conference. National Conference was not an ideological monolith. In fact, I have delineated 4 ideological currents within National Conference. One was represented by Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah and Mirza Afzal Beg. It was communal Muslim subnationalism with dream of a sovereign Muslim ruling class or sovereign Muslim Kashmir. Second group was of Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad. Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad was not committed to Muslim subnationalism in the sense Sheikh Abdullah was. But at the same time, he was interested in Muslim precedents, that Kashmiri Muslims should have precedents and other things. Then the third group is Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq. Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq calls himself Nehruvian Marxist. He calls himself, I have written also earlier, he calls himself Nehruvian Marxist. Sadiq Saab's Marxism was different from Indian Marxism, because Indian Marxists, they are on record, Somnath Lahari in Parliament, Ramesh Thapar in his journal Crossroads, and many others. They were challenged, and B.T. Ranade also. In fact, they challenged accession of India, Kashmir, J&K state to India. But Sadiq was totally opposed to Pakistan after the Pakistani invasion.
Yes.
Sadiq never had any ambiguity in standing by the accession.
We'll go to Sadiq later. We'll go to Sadiq and other things. So you are telling me that there were
fourth factor also.
Yeah, you're telling me fourth factor.
Yes. Fourth factor is Maulana Masoodi, Maulana Sayyid Masoodi. Maulana Sayyid Masoodi was a Pahadi. One national conference was primarily the party of Kashmiri Sunni Muslims. Second factor with Maulana Masoodi was that he was with the Deoband, the people who supported Khilafat movement, and they were anti-colonial in the Khilafat context. It is very important to analyze the character of anti-colonialism. So he was like just Jamaat Ulema Hind and other things. So these were four factions. In 1953, Saad Sheikhllah was becoming unpopular also. One reason was that he let loose reign of repression, not only against the pro-Pak elements, but also against Hindus, many Hindus who were associated with the RSS and other things. Then he resorted to fraudulent elections on the issue of day-to-day management of the economics, and also he was totally becoming unpopular. And the fourth thing which I missed talking about 1953 was that two things are very important. Sheikhllah was not sure whether India would be able to handle the Western pressure of Western bloc. So that induced more vacillation in Sheikhllah. That is very important. Because the people who were with Sheikhllah, some of them I interviewed, in particular Professor N.N. Raina, who was the founder of the communist movement. He told me that when he saw more powerful factors than India, primarily Americans and the British, he thought that there were other options also open to it. It was directly, he thought there is a chance. So that is what was pushing him more confrontational attitude with India.
So then Nehru got too much for Nehru. So at one point then Nehru said enough is enough, and he dismissed it.
Yes.
So it was really a thing of he cannot tolerate.
No, there was another factor. Because up to 1952, communists thought that whatever Sheikhllah is speaking against India, he is fulfilling their dream. He is fulfilling, because I read an interview of P.S. Sundaraiah. He say he's doing our own work. In fact, very interesting thing happened, that there was a division in the local communist group also in Kashmir, the Pandit communists and the Muslim communists. The Muslim communists, they started a movement that was known as Fitre Rojan. They said it is in the genetics of Muslim to be with a Muslim state. So one section of Communist Party was directly asking for accession to Pakistan. In fact, three people from Kashmir, they went to meet B.T. Ranade, who was General Secretary of CPI. They asked for specific instructions, how should communists vote during plebiscite. And BTR's note was very, very vacillating. He did not issue clear instructions which way you should vote.
Yeah.
Then during plebiscite, Sheikhllah was not sure.
Role of communists in Kashmir hasn't been studied as much as it should have been. I'm so glad you're talking about it.
Yes.
Because they also played a very dubious role in Kashmir, extremely dubious role. So we go to 1953. Sheikh Abdullah is dismissed as prime minister, allegedly because he has lost the support of his cabinet, and Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad takes his place. So now starts the era of Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad, and I call this, correct me if I am wrong, I call this the era of relative stability, because all the instability that Kashmir had seen from 1947 to 1953, and suddenly there is some relative stability. In 1954, a presidential order extends several provisions of Indian constitution to J&K's constitution. And then in 1956, J&K adopts its constitution, J&K's own constitution, and defines itself as an integral part of India. This happens under Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad. And 1957, very interesting thing, that J&K holds its first legislative elections. J&K Constituent Assembly is dissolved, and then Home Minister Govind Vallabh Pant visits Srinagar, and says that Kashmir is now fully a part of India. This happens under Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad's reign. So when I look at it from outside, it looks like a very pro-India regime after Abdullah. From outside, it looks like to me that Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad's reign was a long reign for about 10 years. He ruled for 10 years as a prime minister. So it looks to me that it was an era of stability, and it was a pro-India regime. How do you look at Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad's reign from 1950 to 1962?
I agree that the period from 1953, when the first interim government was dismissed and Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad took over as a new Prime Minister, head of state, up to 1971 or even 1975, we had pro-Indian regimes with reasonably good amount of political stability. Bakshi, one, you talked about the constitutional measures, the early constitutional measures when the state constitution was framed and the first elections were held, and a message also went internationally that Kashmir is part of the democratic nation building of Government of India. Bakshi Ghulam, there is a very important difference. Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad Sadiq and Mir Qasim. Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad was a mass-based leader. He had a big social base. He was a very popular leader with charisma. In fact, during the national conference before 1953, Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad had been a key organizer for the party. So as an organizer, he had very firm contact with the masses. So when he took over in 1953, he could mobilize his social base in ensuring the stability of the new regime, as well as confronting Sheikhulah's politics. In fact, Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad was the right leader to hold reins of power in 1953. Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad took a number of measures. One major was he ensured development of the Kashmir in particular. Government of India pumped a lot of funds because they thought that pumping more and more money will create a new elite which will have stakes remaining with the India. Second aspect was the Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad in the initial phase. He dealt very strongly with the separatists who had sought shelter under Sheikhulah's plebiscite front. Third thing was that during the Bakshi period was an era of plenty, where the state was underdeveloped, funds were available. So during Bakshi's regime, there was no organized discrimination against Kashmiri Pandits. Muslims got the preference, but Bakshi was perhaps the only politician who did not make it his political motto to destabilize Kashmiri Hindus. I give this credit to no else in Kashmir Valley. This is very important because normally there is a false understanding that any pro-India politician will be secular automatically. That is not true in the context of Kashmir. We see many pro-Indian politicians, but they are not secular, as we'll come to later to the period of Sadiq. Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad's drawbacks were only two. One was he encouraged corruption, and also he did not observe democracy. So it presented a face of Indian democracy that Indians were against democracy, Kashmiris were denied democracy and civil liberties. Second thing was this corruption model. So that affected India's credibility. That it did not affect so much Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad's credibility inside Kashmir. Then a response to this corruption and democracy was the widening of the differences, because Sadiq was now second top leader of the post-Sheikhullah National Conference. Sadiq, for his own survival also, political survival also, and also as matter of politics, he started having conflict with Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad, one over the share of political power. He thought that his men or his faction, they were getting less posts at the top. Then also on the issue of corruption, Sadiq was quite vocal. And finally, this led to the split in post-Sheikhullah National Conference. A new group was formed by Sadiq, Dipidar, Mir Qasim, and this group is known as Democratic National Conference. Since Sadiq was closer to Communist Party of India, virtually the Democratic National Conference functioned as unofficial unit of Communist Party of India. Then now very important point is in December 1957, DNC held a meeting in Jammu's Vinayak Bazar. And I wonder how many people have that document. For the first time, it called for extension of Indian laws to J&K. That's a turning point. In fact, that Sadiq faction in 1957, through this DNC, they sought to popularize accession by extending the democracy, by explaining how Indian secular nation building was better. Later on, but due to pressure of the Communist Party of India and also Nehru, DNC was wound up and Sadiq faction merged with the Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad's National Conference.
Oh, Sadiq faction, okay. So here we are now. We are talking about Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad brought relative stability, but he had his own issues. He was not highly democratic, and he had a very corruption-riddled reign. Now we come to another very important factor. We are still in the era of prime ministers, still. Then in 1965, before 1965, 1962, China gains control of Aksai Chin region in J&K. After that, what is called Chinese aggression, but really was a war that India unfortunately lost, the only war that India has lost under Nehru. China gains control of Aksai Chin region in Jammu and Kashmir. This is a significant point because now China becomes a party to
third factor, partner.
Becomes
Yes.
a party to J&K thing. Then this happened under Nehru, very important. Then in 1964, Nehru dies. 1965, titles of Prime Minister and Sadr Riyasat are officially changed to Chief Minister and Governor respectively. And what happens after 1965? How was this title, when the titles changed from Sadr Riyasat and Prime Minister, was this as significant as something like my generation would think a revocation of Article 370 was? Was it as significant at that time?
Not as significant, but it was an important message that Kashmir was coming closer to India.
Yeah.
Because previously the concept of Prime Minister, Sadr Riyasat, it meant that there was a semi-sovereign Kashmir. So by changing the nomenclature in 64, because this change of nomenclature happened with the ascension of Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq as Chief Minister.
Yeah.
So this is significant. This was
Sadiq
definitely
was Sadiq part
three
of
things.
Congress then? Was Sadiq part of Congress? At
Yes,
this
yes. Three things happened. One, the Congress was set up. Congress unit was set up. Second thing was doing away with the nomenclature of Wazir Azam and Sadr Riyasat. Third thing was Sadiq becoming the Chief Minister. So it is not as significant as abrogation of 370, but it was an important message that semi-sovereign status, even in its even as a tokenism, is not acceptable.
Yeah. So now we start. Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad's reign is over. Now Sadiq has taken over. Again, he had schemed, and he had everything up until this point is a story of betrayals, because every leader is Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad sort of betrayed Sheikh Abdullah, and then Sadiq sort of betrayed Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad because he wanted to come. So it's a story of betrayals, as we had originally said. Now Sadiq joins Congress and he sets up Congress unit. He's the father of Indian National Congress in Jammu and Kashmir.
It was in fact set up by Muhammad Shafi Quraishi. But Sadiq became the head of Congress party then.
And he became the face of it. Let's say he became the face of it. Let's say he became the face of it. So Congress now sets route. Till now, there is only one political party, National Conference, and there were the political faction that you said Sadiq had created. Now there are two important poles in Kashmir. So now at this point in 1965, there are two important poles. There is National Conference and there is International Congress. Now, and Sadiq becomes the first Chief Minister of Indian National Congress. So what do you think of Sadiq's era? Sadiq was pro-India, as you said, but then he had his issues as well.
There are three main features of Sadiq's rule. One, he never wavered in his commitment to India, and he always he would tell his workers that we should contest Pakistan ideologically also. That is one point. Second thing is, Sadiq had no mass social base. He had no charisma. And in Kashmir, he is called a Khwaja politician, a drawing room politician, operating through coteries. So Sadiq, he started a dangerous trend. He thought that by pandering to Muslim communalism, he will be able to build a social base for himself.
So here is a dichotomy. Even though he is pro India, even though he is against Pakistan, but he is pandering to Muslim sentiment because he now wants a vote base for himself. So that is the dichotomy right there. Okay.
That is very important to understand from two angles. One, Sadiq, there was blatant, organized, institutionalized discrimination against Kashmiri Hindus in educational institutions, in jobs, in promotions. And I have recently come across some, you can say, circumstantial evidence that the second land reform bill, which came during Mir Qasim's time, its groundwork was done during Sadiq's period, 1968-69. In fact, we would have to look for more material. What was the purpose of that second land reform bill? It was to totally destabilize Kashmiri Hindus.
Yeah.
If the first land reform bill came to carve out if its aim was to carve out a landless Kashmiri Hindu community from a landlord community, aim of the second land reform bill was to totally destabilize the rural Pandit and pave way for his exit from the state.
Wow.
So Sadiq's discrimination, institutionalized discrimination, I cannot say whether it built a base for Sadiq. He was under an illusion that this would create a base for himself.
But that was his idea. That's what he wanted to do. Because
secessionism was a more powerful factor, and Sadiq was anti-Pakistan and anti-secessionist. So what he did, by organized discrimination against Kashmiri Hindus, he strengthened the Muslim communal sentiment. And if we understand the dialectical relationship between communalism and the growth of secessionism and fundamentalism, it becomes a very volatile mix. So ultimately, Sadiq's politics, instead of strengthening India in Kashmir, it strengthened fundamentalism and secessionism. And in fact, two things came to crystallize in 1967. One was the factional struggle between the rural rural section of Congress headed by Mir Qasim, Mufti Muhammad Said, Abdul Ghani Lone, Ghulam Rasul Kar, and second was the urban faction of Congress headed by Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq.
Yeah.
So what Sadiq did, Sadiq opened a line of communication with Plebiscite Front of Sheikhullah also. Now you see this from a pro-Indian position to Muslim communalism, and finally suddenly calling for talks with Plebiscite Front, etc.
So, Dr. Tamiri, so Sadiq is chief minister from say 65 almost till 1971. 1971.
Yes.
And an interesting thing that you said, because these things have consequences. When he was trying to build his base and he was trying to strengthen Muslim communalism, and he was trying to play the identity politics and go against Kashmiri Pandits at that time, nobody should be surprised that in 1966, now there is a revival of demand for a referendum in J&K after a while, and several armed outfits spring up in the region.
65.
Front and JKLF. So this happened under Sadiq's reign. Isn't that stunning?
Yes, 1965.
Though he's a pro-India politician.
Yes, 1965. One was that the local groups like Youth League, then second was this political conference of Mahyuddin Kara.
Yeah.
Pakistan sponsored this Operation Gibraltar. But at that point of time, DP Dar was Home Minister of the state. It was DP Dar who organized everything, intelligence and also policy planning, to push back the subversives. But we should not forget that whenever you have a policy of pandering to Muslim communalism, it does not remain limited to communalism. Yeah. It gets translated in the context of Kashmir to secessionism also. That is very, very important to understand. So if there has to be a durable peace in Kashmir, I would dare say that without secularization of institutions, politics, policies, there can never be a durable peace, because the accession of a Muslim majority state would be possible only when there is de-emphasizing of the communal Muslim identity politics in Kashmir.
Yeah.
In fact, failure of the...
Yeah, so we brought out a very interesting contradiction in Sadiq's reign, that this man did not want to go to Pakistan. He was not promoting any pro-Pakistan sentiment. Yet, ironically, he bred secessionism by pandering to Muslim, identity sentiment. These things have lessons later. It's fascinating to read this thing, because we see a lot of it coming back later. So now, after Mir Sadiq, we have understood that this is the time that Plebiscite Front comes, and there is a demand for referendum also comes. Now, in 1971, a third war erupts between India and Pakistan, and in 72, the ill-fated Shimla Agreement, which, as we all know, was a cop-out by Mrs. Gandhi. And so I want you to talk from 1971 to 1975, where there is a war with Pakistan. India almost wins the war, but then, of course, there is a cop-out and the Shimla Agreement, which was not beneficial to India at all, which we know at that point. And then in 1975, there is that ill-fated Indira Sheikh Abdullah Accord, which brings Sheikh Abdullah back in Kashmir politics now after a long time. After almost from 53 to 75, he has been out of power, and now he is back into power. And Indira Gandhi famously said, and I quote, clock cannot be put back in this manner. So what she was referring to obviously was that pre-1953, even though Sheikh Abdullah is back, pre-1953 relationship between Indian Union and J&K, that's not going to happen. So she was clearly saying that no referendum is going to happen. Sheikh Abdullah does drop the demand for plebiscite and resumes the power of as a chief minister after a long time. But 70 to 75 is a fascinating period again. What would you say about this period and revival of Sheikh Abdullah?
I'll say three things. One, the regime of Mir Qasim. Mir Qasim entered into unwritten understanding with Jamaat Islami. He got his own candidates defeated in 5 seats, and that gave political and constitutional legitimacy to Jamaat Islami. Jamaat Islami was to emerge as the main instrument for facilitation of cross-border terrorism by Pakistan in 1980s. So that is, and Indira Gandhi did not object. In fact, Mir Qasim would have never dared to have an understanding with Jamaat Islami had there not been an okay or endorsement by Indira Gandhi as Prime Minister. That is one thing. By this, you can say, informal alliance between Congress and Jamaat Islami, Jamaat cadres gained entry into administration, they gained entry into educational institutions, they used the government institutions also for spreading the propaganda of Jamaat. You can say the first generation indoctrinated with politics of Jamaat was created in the laboratories during Mir Qasim's time, during Congress regime's time. That is very important. Because from that time onwards, you see only rise of Jamaat, not marginalization of Jamaat. Second thing was that the fall of Bangladesh, liberation of Bangladesh, made Congress leadership in Delhi believe that it had convinced Sheikh Abdullah that there was no future for separatist politics in Kashmir. It was a flawed understanding, I would say. Sheikh Abdullah's concern at this point of time was that even though the situation was not ripe for the sort of politics he had been visualizing since 1942 or even earlier, that of having a sovereign or a semi-sovereign Kashmir, but at the same time he thought that age was not on his side and it was better to have a stint of power rather than be outside power and pursuing aimless secessionist politics. During Shimla Agreement, Mrs. Indira Gandhi's advisor, P.N. Haksar, he is also blamed. One, for agreeing to have agreement with Pakistan on terms which suited Pakistan. After all, we had to have agreement with Pakistan over the territory and also the POWs, but the terms were not favorable to India. And it was, as the records which are available in public domain say that P.N. Haksar told Madam Gandhi that Treaty of Versailles has always been a disaster. We should never push the defeated country to the brink. In fact, it creates more problem. Then second thing, I recently seen the archive material which has been put by Congress spokesperson Jairam Ramesh in his biography of P.N. Haksar. In fact, in 1972 itself, Shimla Agreement did not come as simply as an agreement between India and Pakistan, but bringing back Sheikh Abdullah was also came with it. In fact, because in India, classified documents, they are very, very long period. If at all they are released in public, so we'll not be able to say. But this bringing back Sheikh Abdullah was disastrous. This was disastrous because a person who led Plebiscite Front movement for 22 years, in fact, Sheikh Abdullah's letter to Colonel Nasir in 1962, before around the time of Sheikh Abdullah's visit to Algiers, I have seen the original Dixon plan as it was published in the papers, and also Sheikh Abdullah's letter to Jamal Abdul Nasir. there is variance that shows how Sheikh's mind was working in 1962. If with the same Sheikh Abdullah, you decide to hand over the reins of the administration in the sensitive border state, it can only speak how naive has been the Indian leadership in handling a border sensitive state which is coveted by Pakistan and international powers for too long. So Sheikh was coming.
That's an interesting comment. Father knows about Sheikh Abdullah, yet he thinks that there is no other way. He must make peace with him, and we must bring Sheikh Abdullah. So he decides that. Then the daughter brings Sheikh Abdullah, revives him literally from dead. Because if Sheikh Abdullah had not been revived, or if she had this thing, he would have never come back in the politics. There was no way. So Indira revived him for reasons God knows. She could have easily, by then, she had already been meddling in politics. Yes. She could have created any leadership. But then she decides to resurrect Sheikh Abdullah.
Yes, very important point. In fact, a historian said about Nehru and Kashmir. He said Nehru thought that Kashmir was his garden and Sheikhullah was the gardener. So Nehru never thought of Kashmir beyond Sheikhullah. Yeah. He never thought that for having Kashmir and ensuring durable peace, the consolidation of nationalist forces, Kashmiri Hindus, Jammu Dogras, Ladakhis, and also a section of Muslims who really who were ideologically closer to India. Yeah. Second thing you said about Indira Gandhi. I forgot what you exactly said.
I was saying, what were the compulsions? Why did she resurrect Gandhi?
Yes.
I mean, why did she resurrect Abdullah? She had no compulsions.
Yes.
At that time, she was at the peak of her power. She could do anything.
Yes.
Why resurrect Abdullah?
Yes. Three factors. One is India always crave for international sanction, legitimacy. They think whatever policy they have in Kashmir or even in rest of India, it should have international sanction. Yeah. That is one thing. Second thing, they are too sensitive that it should be seen that Kashmir is a part of democratic nation building in Kashmir. She thought that bringing Sheikh Abdullah would say that Kashmir is back on the democracy again, and he has been a popular leader of Kashmir. So that was second thing. I think what you really said, that was the time when you could have an alternate leadership in Kashmir beyond Sheikh Abdullah.
Yeah.
And Sheikh Abdullah in early 70s, he was becoming redundant. He would go to open these shops and other small buildings. He was politically getting redundant.
And Kashmir had gotten used to having the polity without Sheikh Abdullah, because it had already seen three chief ministers. So there was really no need to bring him back. I mean, it's a cardinal mistake. Look at it. It's a huge mistake.
Yes. Rural Kashmir was already part of the regular democratic elections. Yeah. In fact, a section of city people were not so enthusiastic about elections. But rural Kashmir, right from 1957, it has been voting enthusiastically for the elections. So bringing Sheikh Abdullah was disastrous. I firmly believe after following Sheikh Abdullah's role up to 82, and then after 82, the National Conference role of Farukullah also, I dare say that Indian state and the local administration would not have collapsed the way it did in 1990. In fact, Pakistan's cross-border terrorism, it thrives on internal subversion also, subversion of institutions, subversion of political narratives, subversion of the mainstream parties. Yeah. So bringing back Sheikh Abdullah was disastrous. In fact, Mrs. Gandhi committed a number of mistakes. In 1984, she dismissed Farooq Abdullah for security reasons.
I just want to talk about this second era of Sheikh Abdullah now. He is resurrected, but he is not doing anything pro-India anyway. from 1977 to onwards, now we are seeing steady rise of militant outfits. Like a lot of people say that 80s was the period of simmering discontent. I myself have written about it, that 80s when everybody, Hindi cinema was showing films like Kashmir Ki Kali and all that. That is the time when when Kashmir really was seeing a simmering discontent under the layers, which no one saw. So this simmering discontent was really not started by Farooq, but it started under Sheikh Abdullah, when it was seeing the steady rise of militant terrorist outfits, and then several, arresting and killings of terrorist youth is when we see in this time. So would you say that this current phase of terrorism, jihad has been continuing forever in Kashmir. That's beyond the mandate of this show. But this current terrorism that we now are still part of, and now we still are victims of, this started in the second reign, the second homecoming sort of Sheikh Abdullah. That is when it started. And Farooq Abdullah just took it forward.
I would rather divide it. I would divide it into two parts. Mm-hmm. One, 1975 to 1979. Mm-hmm. That is till Soviet intervention in Afghanistan. Yeah, between 1975 to 79, Sheikh Abdullah's concerns were primarily local. Muslim sub-nationalism, promoting, you can say, semi-separatist or separatist bureaucrats in the administration, then changing narratives. It had a local context. In fact, in 1979 also, there were, in the wake of Bhutto's assassination, there were anti-Jamaat riots, and many people claimed that these were sponsored by National Conference. And because the Jamaat was at that point of time challenging the personal leadership of Sheikh Abdullah, there was no ideological conflict between Jamaat and Sheikh Abdullah. It is very important. It was simply because Jamaat was challenging the personal leadership. Then the second phase, which is very, very important for us also, the natives of the state, for the nation also, and for Government of India also, 1979 to 82. That is the second part of Sheikh Abdullah. Americans created Pakistan as the frontline state to counter Soviets. Saudi Arabia, it used money and ideology. Pakistan provided foot soldiers and the training. A portion of that, Pakistan and Ziaul Haq had consolidated himself. He thought that a portion of the money and other infrastructure involved in countering Soviets can be diverted to destabilize Kashmir. So that is also called by strategists, security experts, as diversion of Afghan pipeline. So you see around 1980, Pakistan starting the problem in Punjab. Girilal Jain, the former editor of Times of India, wrote in a very important article, the target is not Punjab, the objective is Kashmir. That is important. Second thing, a number of people from high dignitaries from Saudi Arabia, they started coming to Kashmir and staying there for a while, attending universities, attending big ijtimas. Then you see two important conferences of Allah Wales, Tabligh Ki Jamaat. Then the third thing was Sheikh Abdullah brought, it moved J&K Resettlement Act. I don't know whether you had the opportunity to go through that act.
I did, yeah.
That act visualized the people who had left Kashmir voluntarily in 1947, they would be facilitated to come back. In fact, since I have worked on the 1947 invasion, very few people, hardly about 1,000 or so, they went to Pakistan in search of best pastures, green pastures in 1947. So there was really no issue of facilitating these people who had built who had built their fortunes in Pakistan. So why was Sheikh bringing this JK Resettlement Act? And alongside this, they brought out a pamphlet. Which created a very negative image about India, that it is going for a demographic change of Kashmir, that Kashmiri Muslims were being reduced to a minority. I think that pamphlet might be available in English translation. If you have an opportunity, you can understand the context. And finally, Mrs. Gandhi put her foot down. She refused to grant any sanction to this resettlement bill. So at that point of time, after 1981, we see a lot of convergence in politics of National Conference and Jamaat Islami on the issue of Kashmiri Hindus, on the issue of Indian state building, on the issue of attitude towards secessionists. What was the reason for this convergence? We need to explore. In fact, it would not 1984 dismissal of Dr. Farooq Abdullah. It needs to be seen in this context. What happened post 1979?
So
Mrs. Gandhi,
it's interesting that Nehru and Gandhi placed all bets for Kashmir on Abdullah's and kept getting disappointed, or Nehru had to dismiss Sheikh Abdullah's government, and then in 1977 Congress withdrew support for Sheikh Abdullah's government, although Sheikh Abdullah was then re-elected. So the love between Congress and National Conference kept wavering, and of course, as you say, National Conference kept getting ideologically closer and closer to Jamaat Islami, facilitating
politics.
Islamic
Yes.
Thing in the mainstream politics of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, 1982, Sheikh Abdullah dies, and paving way for Farooq Abdullah. Farooq Abdullah is disaster with capital D. He has no experience. He is not interested in power. Yet he sort of projects himself as a victim of Congress and victim of Delhi. So how do you explain this, era post Sheikh Abdullah and rise of Farooq Abdullah? Because now it was time for third Nehru Gandhi to place their bets on yet another Abdullah and get disappointed. This was Rajiv Farooq Accord. So bring us from Sheikh's death to Rajiv Farooq Accord, and then what was happening in between?
I don't think Dr. Farooq Abdullah was a non-serious politician. I think he had an agenda. He had an agenda. I think it requires a deeper probe on his role from 1982 till 1990.
Yeah, go ahead.
That is very important.
Yeah.
That is very important. It requires a deeper probe.
I agree. Yeah.
Because it is generally said that Farooq dil se saaf hai, he is a non-serious politician, he is a well-meaning. I think that is a wrong understanding of Farooq Abdullah.
Okay.
I think there is a need for reassessing Farooq Abdullah in the context of what happened in 1980s.
Yeah.
Had he been a non-serious politician, why would Indira Gandhi dismiss him in 1984?
Yeah.
She complained in an interview to Girilal Jain. She said, "My generals are complaining that our sources are getting dried up on the borders." Do you think the Prime Minister would make such a comment without any due thought?
Yeah.
Why was Farooq Abdullah not taking action against the people, pleading the administration, taking action against the secessionists?
Because the apple doesn't fall because Dr. Tamiri, apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. He was his father's son. He was his father's son. So he was
yes.
taking forward his father's legacy in more than one way. So fully taking forward, he was his father's inheritor in more than one way. So when we come to that, we will come back to this period, because this is now when it blows up in our face. And this is when terrorism actually raises its head and the gun culture starts in Kashmir. This is when we come into a very, very dangerous phase, because all this has led to this culmination in 1990. Whatever we were talking, the culmination finally happened in 1990 when this tiny micro minority was forced out. In fact, this morning I tweeted that, because Farooq Abdullah said something like Kashmir will be Hindu-less or something. I said Kashmir has been Hindu-less since the process has started since 1339, and then under your thing, the tiny minority 5% also left. So it has been Hindu-less for a long time. So let's not even get there. So we'll talk about Farooq Abdullah's thing a little bit, but I want to take a short detour here. I want to talk about from 1947, if you can quickly summarize what were Kashmiri Pandits doing. Because they were now being, from 1947 onwards also, we have seen under Sheikh's reign, they didn't particularly get any benefits, or in fact, the land to tiller movement was totally against them. So they were getting disenfranchised. Then Bakshish's time saw a little bit of, some succor for them.
Little
bit of succor, but not much. And obviously after that, it started, and we talked about Mir Sadiq, how he was visibly anti-Kashmiri Pandit. We have seen that. Mir Sadiq was anti-Kashmiri Pandit. Then, of course, it all started. And then with the rise of terrorism, we know all that, what happened. My question is, what was Kashmiri Pandit leadership doing? What was their role after 1947? What were they doing? Did they not see the disaster that was coming their way?
No, they saw it. But since to be frank enough, from 1932 to 1990, we had no leadership. We had no leadership in the sense which could frame proper responses. They did understand that destabilization was there. They were facing hostility. The genocide is on the anvil. But somehow they were not visionaries who could visualize the type of responses which would be effective as well as possible in the given situation. 1932, Kashmiri Pandits, there was a mass agitation that goes by the name of Roti agitation. Even small kids as old as 5-year-old, they participated in that agitation, and it was the effect of that agitation that that discriminatory suggestions, measures against Kashmiri Hindus were reversed. After 1932, Kashmiri Pandits did produce leaders like Shiv Narayan Photedar and Kashabandhu. But unfortunately, during 1947, Kashabandhu, he played a great role in addressing immediate problems of Kashmiri Hindus in the wake of targeted attacks by Pakistan in north and central Kashmir. But beyond that, Kashabandhu ji never visualized that he had to do something for long-term survival of Kashmiri Hindus in Valley. He became a part of National Conference. And in fact, in 1953 also, he was arrested along with Sheikh Mullah. Then Pandit Shiv Narayan Photedar, also another popular leader of Kashmiri Hindus, he also joined National Conference, and he was sent to Rajya Sabha. So two main important leaders who had a social base among Kashmiri Hindus, who were, in fact, one of them was a mainstream leader also. If they decide to join the parties which are in a way hostile to Kashmiri Hindus, what do you expect? And then from 1947, we did not see any effective, and the failure of the Pandit leadership came to the surface in 1967. 1967, the institutionalized discrimination and the genocidal policies unleashed by Sadiq regime, it led to massive discontent in Kashmiri Hindu community. Yeah. Around 1967, there was forcible marriage of a Kashmiri Pandit girl with her colleague. That was one issue.
Popularly known as permission-free agitation.
Yes. It was an issue which needed immediate attention and immediate resolution also. It was a one-step resolution. Second thing was the long-standing resentment since early 1960s with the coming of Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq. It had to be fought as a long-term battle.
Yeah.
So there is a serious question mark on the role of Kashmiri Hindu leadership. Why did it link the long-term issue with the short-term? And in fact, because of that linking, the agitation fizzled out. There was tremendous demoralization. And in fact, the major exodus of Kashmiri Hindus started in the wake of fizzling out of 1960 agitation. Also, the policy of witch hunt launched by Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq. In fact, even DP Dar became victim of that, and he had to shift to the center.
Yeah. So we talk about betrayals. When we say that, I always say that Kashmir is a story of betrayals. So it's betrayals of so many fronts.
Yes.
Betrayal. Yes. From the Kashmiri Muslim leadership, of course, and all that, but even the Pandits have been betrayed by their own leadership. It is something that we should really, I think at this time, some introspection needs to be done, because after all, why do we study history? We don't study history just to know the timeline or just to know the period or just to know who was influential or who was not influential or dates. That is a very superficial understanding of history. Why we study history is so that we understand why we are where we are and hopefully don't repeat those mistakes again. So that is why I think Kashmir Pandit community also needs to sort of introspect that why was there a vacuum, what was happening to the leadership, and maybe ensure that this does not happen in future again. So that's important part that we have discussed. One dramatis persona or one character that we have not in this play that we have not talked about is Mufti Muhammad Saeed. So because he came much later after that, and so in mainland India, Kashmir politics is only Abdullah and Mufti. Mufti came much later. Much later. Of course, a very dubious person, and I have no love lost for him. As a political analyst, I'm not supposed to have any,
opinions.
I'm not supposed to have any feelings.
Opinions.
Yes, but Mufti is one person that I get very agitated about probably because it happened in front of my eyes. So, talk a little bit about Mufti's role. As a Congress person in India, Mufti never was part of National Conference. So this is one person who did not come from National Conference belly. So when I see Muftis and Abdullahs together in Gupkar, it's fascinating what history can do to you and what politics can do to you. But they've been traditional rivals. Mufti did not come from the womb of National Conference politics, so to speak. He charted his own way with Congress first, and then of course started his own party, PDP. So talk to me a little bit about Mufti's rise and what that meant for Kashmir politics.
Mufti's innings started in Kashmir politics in 1957-58 when DNC was functioning. Important point. In fact, Pandit Omkarnath Russell was a senior leader in Congress, National Conference, and he told me that it was he who had admitted Mufti Saeed into Democratic National Conference.
Wow.
Mufti Muhammad Saeed, I do not know his family was on which side in 1947. It would be really interesting to inquire into that. Then the third part, that Mufti as I said, that there was a competition between the rural and the urban sections of the Congress National Conference. Mufti made his way into the ministerial berth. Then in the factional struggle between Sadiq and Mir Qasim, Mufti, of course, as part of the rural Congress leadership, he sided with this Mir Qasim. In fact, as we are told, that it was in that period when Qasim was closer to National Conference, Mufti too was with the Jamaat Islami. So Mufti's understanding with the Jamaat Islami or closeness, whatever you may call it, it started during the this Mir Qasim era. One characteristic feature of Mufti Muhammad Said that has determined and defined his politics all through was his anti-Abdullahism. So anybody that served this interest was an ally of Mufti. And in 1977, it is said that Mufti was responsible for withdrawal of support to this Sheikh Abdullah government. Then in 1980s, Mufti sought to forge a combination that united all non-Kashmiri Sunni sections. During that period, you see the Shia leadership under Maulvi Iftikhar Ansari, then Gujars also coming closer as part of the revitalized Congress, and along with it, though it was not able to get many seats in Kashmir, but it gave strong resistance to National Conference in 1983 elections, and Indira Gandhi backed Mufti Muhammad Said to the hilt, his policies, and by campaigning against the communal politics of National Conference, Mrs. Indira Gandhi was able to galvanize support in the Jammu region, and they won as many as 23 seats. So after the death of Indira Gandhi, Mufti Muhammad Said lost the support of the Congress High Command that refused to back his politics of anti-Abdullahism. So you see, then after this Rajiv Abdullah Accord, Mufti Muhammad Said, in little political wilderness, he was taken as Tourism Minister of Tourism and Center. Then it is said that MUF had also, Muslim United Front had also blessings of Mufti Muhammad Said. Then Mufti Muhammad Said finally going with Janata Dal. Anything which helped him in anti-Abdullahism was welcome as an ally to Mufti Muhammad Said. And then in 1990, that is very important, Mufti Muhammad Said, Janata Dal had no major base. In fact, it depended on the two crutches, BJP and the left front, who were outside the government. Mufti Muhammad Said could get the Home Minister in the post. That is very important to understand the Pandit migration also. Many people have asked me why internal security camps were not set up. I will not comment on that. But definitely VP Singh was Prime Minister and Mufti Muhammad Said was Home Minister. They have to answer these questions. Why did they allow selective killings of Kashmiri Hindus? In fact, I would name 4 important decisions when from January to February end. First of all, you see that
January 1990 to February 1990. That 1 month.
I'll say even December. After he took over. You see, one was the way these 5 terrorists were released in exchange in exchange of Rubiya Said. There were dissenting comments by Farooq Abdullah that they would have otherwise also released. But the terms and the way Mufti Said got this released, it directly fueled secessionism, and it emboldened, it showed that government of India was nothing before the rising power of the jihadists.
Absolutely.
That was one.
Absolutely.
Second, in January, when he visited Srinagar, he asked that the BSF bunkers should be removed from the city because this creates irritation to the local Muslims. Third thing was they allowed a massive procession of 1 lakh people to Trari Sharif when it was snowing heavily. Why did he allow it? And the last, in fact, in January, Mr. Jagmohan, he was so much annoyed with the government that he stayed away from work, and he was in Jammu till he was mollified again. Then the fourth disastrous decision was allowing the massive anti-Indian processions to the local UN military observer group. All these four measures convinced, and along with that, what was happening in Romania, it convinced Romania and this Soviet Union also. It gave an impression to Kashmiri Muslims that India was about to leave Kashmir. And
Azadi was around the corner.
Yes, because many employees were.
I have to end now, but I want to end on the final Nehru-Gandhi disaster in Kashmir. And after that, we start the modern current era, and that we will post-terrorism, post-90, and that we'll invite you one more time and we'll talk about that era later. But the final disaster before 1990 was Rajiv Farooq Accord, that disastrous accord that they did, getting together of what they did. I want you to talk a little bit about that accord and how that totally fueled. Secessionism had been fueling for a long time, but that completely blew the lid. And now secessionists were out and they were roaming around with guns, and terrorists were running around with guns. So it happened right after that Rajiv Farooq Accord. How was it so disastrous? What was that Rajiv Farooq Accord?
I do not think that things really went worse after Rajiv Farooq Accord, but I'll go a little. I'll drift a little. In fact, if you really study the local situation, 1983 onwards, it is said that Kashmiri Muslim youth had been going across for training.
Right.
So it started before. That is why I say the role of national conference government should be probed. That is very important.
Very important.
And what, in fact, even in 1986, the pogrom against Kashmiri Hindus, I don't think it was a simple communal incident which was staged to get this Gulsha government dismissed and install Congress in power. I think it was rehearsal for ethnic cleansing. I have absolutely no doubt to say this, that 1986 was a rehearsal for ethnic cleansing, which was to follow few years later. What really Rajiv Abdullah Accord did, it was again the two incompetent people mishandling the situation. There was no institutional appraisal of threats. There was no urgency to revitalize the administration, remove the undesirable elements, or create a political narrative. I think Rajiv Farooq Abdullah Accord, most of the people, they interpreted that it was just rigged election. I don't buy the theory of rigged elections as the cause of terrorism.
I don't either.
I don't. So what Rajiv Abdullah Accord was that you had an incompetent government which was unable to fathom the dimensions of the cross-border war launched by Pakistan. That is how I see.
The unstable government in Kashmir, unstable government, incompetent leadership, both in Kashmir and in center. Then that finally blew up the lid, and terrorists were out in open with the guns. And that brings us to 1990 and post 1990. Of course, we will talk again in another episode. Dr. Tamiri, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity.
Not at all. This has been such a learning.
Share my views.
This has been such a learning experience. I mean, this was an arduous task, as I said, from 1947 to 1990, recreating this history and talking about it and making sure that the young people that have joined us, they understand that there are multiple layers of Kashmir, and it's not a superficial
and layers within layers
and superficial understanding now will only produce superficial results later and superficial solutions. So if you don't understand what has gone past, you will not be able to understand, you will not be able to control what is going to happen in the future. So it's very important that we understand what happened in the past. Dr. Tamiri, thank you so much for your time. We will call you again and we will talk to you again. Thank you a lot. And I'm really looking forward to your two-volume. I'm looking forward to your two-volume book that's going to come. And that's finally going to blow up that another propaganda about 1947. Thank you so much, and to the viewers of Epicenter, thank you so much for being with us. I have been receiving so many comments about the last 3 episodes that we did, especially with Dr. Pandita that we did about Sufism. Thank you so much. I have read every single comment that you sent. We are going to do similar deep dives in future as well. And anything that legacy media is not interested in, anything that is an elephant in the room conversation, be sure it will happen on Epicenter. Keep reading, keep sending your messages, be well, and see you next time. This is Sunanda Vashisht signing off.